Slides dena mat bhulna. Hello everybody, welcome to this session on event management strategies. In this session, we will be dealing with what is strategic planning for event management. We will be dealing with conceptualizing and planning the event. We will be dealing with elements of the planning process, the staging of an event, logistics management, crowd and risk management, HRM and events. So this is the basic area that we will be covering in this session. So let us begin with strategic planning of events. When I say strategic planning, what I basically mean is effective planning for any kind of event that is going to take place, be it formal or informal in nature. The effective planning is what is actually come to light, what is actually going to be in front of the audiences, what is it that the people will actually be judging us on. That is effective planning. Then of course, we need to define the goals, why this event is being organized. We also need to identify ways of achieving these goals. When I say ways of achieving the goals, what are you trying to organize through the event? How are you getting to the goal? Event is a mean, it is basically a vehicle of bringing across the message to the right kind of target audience. So how is it that you have been able to achieve that goal of meeting the right audiences through this vehicle of this event that you're going to organize? Then of course, it is a process and it is not a one-time activity. Why? Because a lot of strategic planning goes into it. It begins much before the day when the actual event is going to be held. So right from the time of planning to creating a buzz about it and then communicating to the audiences as to what they should be expecting out of this event, all of them together. It also needs to be continually observed. Continually observed in terms of creating any midterm corrections, in terms of anything going wrong or anything that's offhanded and has to be brought back to track, keeps you motivated and on your toes. So it has to be continually observed. All these things together talk about strategic planning of an event. Under the subject, this umbrella term of strategic planning come a number of things, one of which is conceptualizing and planning. Conceptualizing is an art as well as a science. It is an art because it depends on you how beautifully well made does the event come out to be. It is also a science because everything has to be calculated in a logical, rational manner. One should be able to evaluate the opportunities to encash. Often in my sessions I have spoken about the SWOT analysis, an old technique but still relevant in the realm of marketing today. So when we say SWOT, it is the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. It is very important to calculate all four of them, especially focusing on what are the basic opportunities that you are getting which will make this event special. Then one has to have a clear understanding of the objectives. What are the objectives that we are tending to? Say for example, if we talk of a destination wedding is meant to be a wholesome experience for the guests. So ideally this is not the kind of wedding celebration where you have thousands of people coming over. Here you have a limited capacity of people, but everything is put up in a manner that this destination, the idea of enjoying the destination comes to the audiences while they are also attending the wedding event. So one also has to have a clear understanding of objectives. What is the kind of objective that one is looking for? Say for example, a simple wedding event which is held usually in the city as compared to a destination wedding, as compared to a simple wedding which happens in a court or a temple or somewhere. So you look at the objectives everywhere, it is all different and comes from a different kind of thought pattern, different kind of background. So this makes it more important. And then why or for whom is it being organized? Obviously, when I say destination wedding, it is not the middle class people who would opt for it. But as compared to that, when you look at something which is tight on the budget, then you have to organize things in a manner that maximum people or the guest list fits in the required venue and the best possible arrangements can be made within those restraints of the budget. So why and for whom is it being organized is again an important aspect. What will be the plan of action? What is the kind of plan of action that you're going to execute if it is about foreigners who you're going to entertain and who are coming to India maybe for the first or the second time, and they want to look at the colorful culture of the country? In contrast, how do you deal with people who are from the rural background and have come only to attend an event and would shortly be back? So the plan of action will be different in both kind of events. When is it scheduled? That too is very important. Say for example, it should not be very near to any other important thing which is happening. Say for example, if you're trying to organize the Olympics games or the Asian games somewhere, it should not be close to elections. It should not be close to something which can lead to any kind of impact on the event per se. So the scheduling is important. Also, when I say when is it being scheduled, it also gives me a timeline. So if some event is going to be scheduled say 6 months from now, I have ample time to plan everything, all the nitty-gritties and all the detailing. Like they say, the devil lies in the details. So you have all the time to play with the details. But when I know that it is happening in a month's time or maybe a fortnight more than that, then obviously you are working on tight schedules. So it is very important to understand whether that kind of an event can be done in that kind of a time schedule. Also, how will you go about it? How do you plan to go about the entire thing? Maybe you will have to hunt for the talent. Maybe you will have to manage everything right from the beginning because you do not have anything much in store, or whatever you have in store does not match the expectations of the event that you have taken up. So for various things you need to know how to go about what. Now we come to the elements of planning process. We were so far talking about conceptualizing. When you conceptualize the event, it is more about ideating. It is more about coming up with that big idea which will be able to communicate the objectives and get the maximum output from the creation of that event. But when we talk about the planning process, there are various elements that are involved in it. Each one of it has to be planned properly. Like the first thing is you have to check the feasibility of the event. How feasible is it to organize an auto show in a month's time? Or how feasible is it to organize an event for the craftsmen of India in a fortnight? Is it feasible, not feasible? Depends on your past experiences, depends on the kind of homework that's already been done with you, depends on whether you've done such kind of an event before, etc. Then of course situational analysis and brainstorming. Looking, say for example, if you want to organize an event for the craftsmen of the country, given the times of the pandemic, how are you going to approach it? The situation analysis is that people must not gather at one place. The situation analysis is the economy is not doing very well because there's a lockdown in the country. So in such kind of a situation, how are you going to organize an event such that people come across and yet people are ready to spend for something like this, since there are cuts and in the employment and everywhere, so people would be more careful about spending their money anywhere. So what is the kind of situation analysis that you are doing for this, and then what is the kind of a brainstorming session is required so that you are able to generate more ideas, keeping in mind the situation analysis that you have done. So the more and better the implementable ideas, the more is the success for the event. Identified sponsorship opportunities. There are various kind of events that take place by help of sponsorships coming from various organizations. Anybody who is remotely related to any event that you're going to have would like to sponsor that event. So the organization has to see what is it that they get by sponsoring this event, and then you also have to be enough impactful and effective in your communication in addressing them, motivating them, and ensuring that they are ready to sponsor the event. Then venue and other logistics. An event has to be done. Where will it be done? What time will it be done? What are the other external factors and internal factors that will come into play? How are you going to control them? All of it is important and comes as a part of the planning process for the event. Then form a team and assign roles. That's very basic and the very initial step that you take after you know what your project is. So you form a team accordingly and assign various roles to different people. And then you set a deadline. Deadline setting is very important if you want your event to be a success, because people have to know, the team has to know how much time do they have to complete a certain section of the work. Then you have to evaluate the budget provisions, which is the most basic thing again. And marketing the event is also important, because given your budgetary constraints, which all marketing tools are you going to use? How are you going to customize the marketing tools? And once you have those tools together, how are you going to put them up across to the audiences that the basic objective of the event gets met? All these are parts of planning process of the event. Then of course media coordination is important. Say for example, you are going to organize a health mela for an organization. So that organization would like it very much that it becomes the focus of the media, because in times where health has become the primary concern and is the only differentiator between who lives and who does not, it is important that such kind of a health mela is able to do some good to the society. So this makes it newsy, and once there is some component of news in it, media would like to cover it. So how do you coordinate with the media? What kind of media do you get there, and how forcefully are you able to impress upon them the fact that it is important to cover an event like this, and see to it that it gets covered in television channels or news channels or newspapers, wherever. Then we come to the actual execution of the event. So far the media coordination and everything has been done looking at the event that is going to happen. So this is all a process of planning. Now we are looking at the execution once it is being done. So you have to be very, very creative and insightful. The brainstorming sessions come into light here. What you brainstormed about, is it really going to be implementable? You're going to put your ideas to test. So this is the execution of the event. And of course, post-event evaluation and feedback is important, so that we know where we went wrong, and we see to it that in the future there has to be some scope for correction and those mistakes don't get repeated. Now so far we were talking about planning. Now we come to the actual staging of the event. Bringing all the elements of a planned event together to present them in front of its audience is called event staging. So when I say I'm staging an event, means I'm putting it in front of the audiences for them to look at it and take home whatever points they want to. The basic elements of staging an event are: number one, the choice and organization of venue. Like I just gave you an example of a destination wedding as compared to a normal wedding. How do you choose the destination? The venue there becomes really, really important. So the choice and organization of venue is based on 1, the number of expected audiences, 2, the budget, 3, the nature of the event, what kind of an event is it, whether it is formal, whether it is informal, what is it going to look like, and the invited speakers or dignitaries. So sometimes it is not just a wedding or an informal or a family related function. It can also be corporate event. In case of a corporate event, you have to look at the list of the invited speakers and dignitaries, how they will be managed, because there has to be a separate section which will manage the dignitaries and see to it that they are comfortable and there is no security concern, and it all goes smooth. Then of course there are security risks that have to be calculated, managed, and there has to be a separate planning for that. The timing of the event is also very important. The weather conditions, there are places where you wouldn't know when it would rain. So ideally there has to be some provision for such kind of a weather, or the availability or arrangement of light and sound. When I say availability or arrangement of light and sound, it is important in context of any kind of event that is taking place. Like if I talk of Auto Expo as compared to if I talk of a World Book Fair or a wedding or a corporate event, anywhere and everywhere light and sound has much to do. So those arrangements must be very solid. And of course, any need for special effects like laser work, firework also needs to be calculated and accommodated amongst the budgetary constraints that are available to you. The second thing is the theme of the event. often you would have heard of themes like wild or retro or nostalgia, Bollywood, circus, Halloween. Halloween is the latest in thing, especially with the children. So most of the times formal as well as informal events these days have certain themes to cling to. Now this theme will depend on the nature of the event. It will also depend on the sound and light arranged accordingly, because if you are into a Halloween mode, you cannot be having very bright lights. It has to have the feel of Halloween all around. Then things to be kept in mind would include seating, the entry and exit to ensure smooth navigation. When I say smooth navigation, because event is something which will bring a large number of people to this venue. So all these people together, there should not be a case that in case of an emergency, there is some stampede or some unwanted, untoward incident happens. So there has to be a smooth navigation. There has to be more than one entry points and exit points, and the navigation of guests as well as audiences must be very smooth. One has to make it accessible for physically challenged if they are on the guest list. More importantly, these days people take care of this disabled, because we progressively try to be an all-inclusive society. So we try to include everyone, the physically disabled, the gender, all aspects come into the picture now. So it is important that in case physically challenged people, physically disabled people are on your guest list, you make sure that there is ample provision for them to not face any difficulty during the event. Then of course the basics of washrooms and drinking water and first aid kits and parking facilities, those are the most basic things. One always have to keep a plan B ready, because crisis can always come uncomprehensibly. So uncomprehendingly, when you have a crisis situation, a plan B will always be of use to you. There has to be some provision for emergency exit. There has to be one point communication contact. In case something goes wrong, how do we handle it? So one point communication contact has to be there. If there are more than one people sending in or taking in information, obviously it will lead to confusion and greater clutter. And this is important because we have to avoid confusion, and logical arrangements of speeches and performances need to be made. A logical arrangement would mean who will speak what and after whom. So you have to have that entire arrangement and control it properly, so that the actual impact of the communication does not get lost anywhere, because at the end of it the organizers are going to spend money on the event. So in such kind of a case, one has to ensure that the objectives why the event has been organized must be met. Performances should be according to audience taste and sponsors' requirement and the event theme. When I say performances, a number of times, say for example an academic event like a conference, at the end of the conference there is a cultural show. So that is what I mean when I indicate performances here. So performances should be according to audience taste. They should suit the theme and the nature of the event, and it should also, of course, be according to the sponsor's requirement. If the event has to be recorded, make adequate arrangements for the recording. And the third and another important aspect, usually at the end of events everybody talks about it, is the catering. So when I say catering, it is important that we identify right in the beginning, at the planning stage itself, whether the dinner is formal or informal in nature. And then the number of guests, the food preferences, and the requirement of the service staff needs to be calculated. Now let us look at logistics. Logistics and their requirement differ from event to event. So no uniform logistic management strategy can be implemented everywhere. But there are certain elements that we can keep in mind and accordingly make arrangement for the logistics. The first and the foremost, people management. When I say people, it means the audiences as well as the performers as well as the sponsors. So and of course your team, the management team. In case of a ticketed event, one must prefer an online sales and registration along with counter ticketing. So while a ticketing event is on, it is much better that people take an advance ticket so that no commotion is created at the time of the event. Transportation, if planning a pick or drop for the audience is going to happen, then what are the various factors to be kept in mind? Like say for example, the mode of transportation, is it going to be public or private vehicles? The arrival or departure schedules are to be maintained. You should know whose flight is coming in when or who has to be picked up from where at what time. So the arrival and departure schedule must not suffer from mismanagement. Provisions to control traffic flow should also be worked out with the civic authorities, because there can be, like say for example, in bigger fairs or in bigger events, there are a lot of people, there are a lot of footfalls. In such kind of a scenario, it is important that the civic authorities and your management team should sit together and figure out how the traffic flow will be controlled. Product management is another aspect. One has to think about the product requirement at the time of event at various stages. Like the logistics manager must prepare the list meticulously, right from the requirement of a safety pin to generators, to first aid, to pen drives, whatever you think, this should be meticulously calculated as to what can be needed and whether all that is there at the time of the event or not. And then of course accommodation is one aspect. When I say accommodation, all the people there may not require accommodation, but for performers or people who have come from outside the city, it is important, because even participants or performers, if they need accommodation, there has to be some provision, some guidance for finding accommodation, or your own provision for accommodation should be there. Looking at infrastructure and communication, this has become the most important aspect in events today. You should know where to stall set tops and when to have kiosks and booths. It must be highly disabled friendly. It should ensure proper communication between organizers and audience and performers. This proper communication is to see to it that there is no confusion, no commotion at any step during the event. And then we make use of various things like walkie-talkies, like signboards, microphones and other equipment in terms of publicity equipment as well as the electronic equipment, so as to communicate with the audiences or public at large. And of course, solid waste management post-event is one important aspect. A number of times we would see that once the event is over, nobody bothers about cleaning the space. But it is highly professional and highly recommended that the entire space, the entire venue that was hired for an event be cleaned of all the solid waste, and there should be a proper solid waste management system in place which can look after this. Now let us look at the last aspect of this, which talks about the crowd and risk management. When I say risk management, there are always, whenever a lot of people are gathering at one place, the chances of having a problem can be too much. So the risk management is identification and analysis, the assessment and control, avoidance, minimization or elimination of unacceptable risks. What do I mean by unacceptable risks? Like the venue catching a fire, or a bomb blast taking place there, or somebody getting kidnapped. So those are the kind of risks which a person must be ready to face, and because these are highly unprecedented, so this is a crisis kind of a situation that can arise anytime, anywhere. So one has to be able to identify these risks, to analyze how and what can go wrong, and to assess it properly as to what can be the magnitude of the thing going wrong. How do you control it? How do you avoid it? And how do you minimize the impact or totally eliminate it? So this is what we understand by risk management. When I talk of various strategies, it is all based on common sense, but yet there are certain strategies like risk assumption, whereby you already figure out what can go wrong where. Risk avoidance, what are the steps, the necessary guidelines we've created, what are the steps we take in order to ensure that nothing goes wrong during the event. The risk transfer, say for example traffic. So if some place catches fire and there's a stampede because there is a single exit, what happens? So in such kind of a scenario, how do you see to it that the risk gets minimized? That is risk transfer. So all those are strategies of risk management. Then the overall safety and security is also a prime concern. The safety and security of the goods and of the people, the audience, the organizers, the performers, everyone, as well as the property. Event managers must evaluate all possible situations where crowd can go out of control, and there should be clear guidelines that should be issued for code of conduct. Say for example, in large World Book Fairs and all those large events, there are various kinds of security checks, and it is already told that people will not carry more than a handbag. Maybe women can carry handbag and others are not allowed to carry any bags. So there should be clear guidelines and there should be a code of conduct which must be followed. Security check posts should be at various points so that there is no problem, no lapse as far as security goes. Then one must make rules and ensure public awareness. The rules must be, say for example, during large events, tickets will not be given at the counter, they must be taken from the metro stations, or there are places that you have allocated all across the city at various places where they should buy their ticket and then come at the event. Then of course, one can also think of hiring crowd management personnel. These people are specifically trained to manage crowds. And then local police can also be contacted for patrolling as well as for surveillance. This instills confidence in general public as well as helps you in case of a crisis, because police would help. Then we talk about HRM, Human Resource Management and Events. When I say HRM, it includes assessment of human force needed for the event, identifying skilled people. Various people, everybody cannot fit in the same size of the shoe. So various people who look after different kinds of needs according to their skills. Assigning different tasks to the teams that are made up, smaller teams are made up, and then tasks are assigned. Job analysis and job description. Which team or which particular person is going to do what and in how long a period. And exactly defining what he can or cannot do in order to get his job